The refrigerator. There is the sound of the refrigerator being on. There is the sound of God beating inside my heart, which is a strange sound since He does not exist. There is the sound of a stone sent years ago, which was never answered. There is the sound of handwriting on a human forehead. There is the sound of 43 ducks flying through glass. There is the sound of a feather duster. There is the sound of dust heard over the telephone. There is the sound of a piano with a faint heart coming from below, a hell where people are happy. There is the sound of someone standing on the grave of someone they do not know and do not care about. There is the sound the same person makes standing on their own grave. I love the sound of the iron on the ironing board, turning on and off, waiting for someone to come. There is the sound of an electrical bill. There is the sound of a book lying closed, which is the sound of the storm painter in his dungeon. There is the sound of someone saying your name, which, if they did not have to, they would not want to. There is the sound of peaceful breathing in a far cranny where mouths all over the body break into smiles. There is the sound of a razor traveling with a hair. There is the profound sound of plates being stacked. Or is it the sound of dinkiness I hear? There is the sound of the refrigerator being off. There is the sound of everyone thinking the same thing at the same time, and the sound of one leafing through a magazine looking for a lifestyle. There is the sound of a cat on a hot tin roof, which is the imaginary sound of silk. The two greatest Egyptian gods made love in the womb. They were twins, so the sound of their birth was the sound of a pregnant baby. And this baby gave birth in turn, which is time, to the sound of the world in which you live. I'm so very honored to be here in Berkeley, City of Ideas. I was kind of nervous, never been to the City of Ideas, and so I started thinking, God, I got to write something suitable. And I started thinking about ideas and where they come from and what we do with them and how they get passed on, and that's kind of, this poem is sort of an occasional poem. It's called Esther's Idea. We were waiting long and anxiously for the rain when the hot winds blew the unhappy lives of Ruskin and Hazlitt in through the open window, deeply affecting our own Aunt Esther. It was Esther's idea to put our pictures in albums. It was Esther's idea that we capture them. It was her idea that we sit in the evening and talk openly about love, and her idea to bring out the oil lamp, trimming its wick. It was her idea to stop going to church, and her idea that the children eat ice cream before going to bed. It was Esther's idea to take in a border, Esther's idea to hang curtains. It was Esther's idea to free insects. It was Esther's idea to keep the house dry and dust-free and count the days till it was safe to eat liver again. Afterwards, it was Esther's idea there is no such thing as bad weather. It was Esther's idea to love color above all else, to bound books in white vellum. And we think at the end, it was her idea to sit on the porch and stare at the road without speaking. It was our idea to bury her. And afterwards, we had the idea that most lilies are easy. We had an idea for lobster bait, and an idea of Esther we took to our graves. As a man thinketh. 30 years of thoughts have been organized in plain brown folders with the main idea marked boldly on each cover. I rise from my job, which I have done well, and it has exhausted me. The way a gardener, after a whole season of labor, just stands there, strangely clad and in the dumps, eating his own onion, and it hurts. I look out the window and don't know what to think. I see red sunflowers. I see a baby crawling next to the eternal ocean. I see I am becoming the last trash can on earth. one of the many last trash cans on Earth. My job is to tend the garbage carefully, then throw it out with a backhand. All except my shoes, which I would like to be buried in. Please praise me for that. Quick note about the think source. My dreams are not worth a halfpenny. A battery cut in two, 80 orange roses, an old boyfriend in a new car of the kind he would never drive. Fortunately for us, the universe is not that complicated. Eventually, words like torpor and muddle came into being, and then torporous, muddled accounts of the universe took over the populace, many of whom died while it was snowing. There is always someone willing to tell you who they were, though it takes a little time to find the professional, but much less than if you had to do the reading yourself. If you are planning on being born, you should know there was a primordial abundance of helium. If something remains in the same position for 9 consecutive days, it is safe to assume it has passed, and that oleanders really do grow along the Oxus, which is a river. After that, you are free to pursue the violent activity of happiness. But for the universe, after the first 3 minutes, nothing of interest occurred for 700,000 years. It just went on cooling and expanding as if it were asleep on a premium mattress until it felt cold enough to wake up and make stars. The rest is almost history. Volcanic holes, small French paintings, one-eyed bats, a handwritten note wedged between the doors of a church. And oh, one more thing. When asked if you say, "I do not dance," the next day an infant is born without feet. And why I am not a good kisser. Because I open my mouth too wide, trying to take in the curtains behind us and everything outside the window except the little black dog who does not like me, so that at the last moment I shut my mouth. Because Cipriano de Rore was not thinking when he wrote his sacred and secular motets, or there would be only one kind, and this affects my lips in terrible ways. Because at the last minute I see a lemon sitting on a gravestone, and that is a thing that would appear impossible, and the kiss is already concluded in its entirety. Because I learned everything about the beautiful in a guide to the weather by Boren van Loon, so the nature of lenticular clouds and anticyclones and several other things dovetail in my mind, and at once it strikes me what quality goes to form a good kisser, especially at this moment, and which you possess so enormously. I mean, when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without me, I am dreadfully afraid he will slip away while my kiss is trying to think what to do. Because I think you will try and read what is written on my tongue, and this causes me to interrupt with questions. A red frock, red stockings, and the rooster dead? Dead of what? Because of that other woman inside me who knows how the red skirt and red stockings came into my mouth, but persists with the annoying questions leading to her genuine ignorance. Because just when our teeth are ready to hide, I become a quisling and forget the election results and industrial secrets leading to the manufacture of woolen ice cream cones, changing the futures of ice worms everywhere. Can it be that even the greatest kisser ever arrived at his goal without putting aside numerous objections? Because every kiss is like throwing a pair of doll eyes into the air and trying to follow them with your own. However it may be, oh, for a life of kisses instead of painting volcanoes. Even if my kiss is like a paintbrush made from hairs. Even if my kiss is squaw root, which is a scaly herb of the broomrape family, parasitic on oaks. Even if a sailor went to sea in me to see what he could see in me, and all that he could see in me was the bottom of the deep dark sea in me. Even though I know nothing can be gained by running screaming into the night like a mouth, into the mouth like a velvet movie theater with planets painted on its ceilings, where you will find me, your podmate, in some kind of beautiful trouble over moccasin stitch number 3, which is required for my release. Something of a tractate. It was gone now, the boring summer, and those who survived it were stuffed with famous haiku. They were asked to reconsider everything they thought they knew about slipcovers, to eat bold and dangerous amounts of macaroni. They were taught it is better to say he died than to say he is dead, and then the long red winter began. Occasionally, an advertisement would shock the human out of them. Toads would sit on stones until lichen formed on their bellies. The air seemed to be at least partially composed of naphthalene, and so preserved, something of a tractate, when the last red leaf fluttered helplessly into the water, but seemed too to be joyfully dissolving in tears, as if to say, I too am a Swabian, born of carbon from the black pine forests, where the essence of all conceivable beauty is to put a stout heart to a steep hill. O Canada, is it raining where you are too? And the dirt roads are wet, and the air smells of mushrooms, and all the mailboxes are empty. If it is not raining where you are, it will be. Can you stop a wandering fool with no earthly goods from preceding you or following after? A girl went to work. The same girl came back. They passed each other along the dreary road. They sat next to each other on the bus. If they spoke, it was about the weather. Or one girl said, the friend of a friend of a friend has died in Canada. And the other said, I'm sorry. I hope you are able to live your life over again. Short, exact sequence. All day long, encryptions of sand filled the pith helmet of my head. The afternoon crested and slumped, always advancing. The sun was everywhere. I slept and was antsy. I awoke and the silence had been refilled. I ate and the master of energy arrived. The short, exact sequence of my breath grew longer. I took a strip of dust that was dying on the wall from off the wall and made the dancing puppet of a ghost who did not disintegrate for 826 days, during which I repeated the ritual described above until I could perform it with my eyes closed and in front of other people. "13. I was 13, my whole leg in a cast. It was like lugging a piece of pottery around. And every human face I knew took a pen and wrote on me. I used to lie in bed at night and read it. And when I healed, they broke it. I walked away without a shard. Paula, Carl, whoever you are, I will not be there to drink the water beside your bed. I read 3,000 books, and then I died." Concerning essential existence. The horse mounted the mare slowly and precisely, and then stopped. He was profoundly disturbed by a piece of straw. He was profoundly distracted by the sad toy upside down in the tree. He was profoundly disengaged by half a cloud in the corner of his wet eye. And then he continued, "Nothing is forgot by lovers except who they are." My happiness. I lay my happiness in a field. My happiness lay in the field and looked up at the sky. My happiness extended the same courtesy to the clouds. My happiness in the field was visible for miles around. My happiness was visible to the hawk. My happiness was fond of the beetle beside it. A porcupine lumbered by. My happiness followed it. Perhaps because it was being followed, the porcupine stole my happiness. My happiness lumbered along after itself, happily. We came to a road. The porcupine went into a culvert and didn't come out, and that was the end of my happiness. Grief. First, it will comfort you to know there are crows and calipers for measuring the amount of sunshine that can escape from under the shadows of thought. Far out at sea, ships go down in a crippled light, and bunches of black iris are sent to the remaining crew. You too shall have lived and died a jot, with the queer feeling you were vast and ageless, with a good education in sleep, prepared to die with one regret, that you could not devote more years in vain. And no one could do nothing but let it happen. Whatever was tied to the mast, the waves have come. Here they are. After anxiety turns into pain, and pain turns into rain, and the rain into a doorbell on the face, the forehead splits open. Crows come for that speck of gold you were saving for your eyelids at the point of death, and turn away, wildly happy. Hazeline. After Father died, he said that dying had taken a longer time than he had previously imagined possible. He was not dead at that time, but we did not know it. His eyes had long ceased being the source of anything. He was stiff as a board, and he had no pulse. Mother and I were very interested in everything he had to say, the way the living are with experts. He said it was extremely painful, even now, but not in any way that he could explain or describe. Speaking was painful, he said, more painful than anything else, because being dead, he couldn't describe it. It didn't amount to very much. There was no way we could understand, and by the time we ourselves died, he would be long gone. He said there was a woman down the hall who was also dead, though no one knew it yet, and he could talk to her, but she wasn't listening. Mother bristled when he said this, and I put my hand on her arm. He was telling about how people, when they are dead, know each other by little signs that are not of this world. When Dr. Fillmore came in and said Dad would be fine, though he didn't use those words exactly, he used, "The old possum is going to be fine." That was Father. It didn't take anyone long to get to know him, a lot less time than it took to die, according to Dad, who died 6 weeks later without speaking a single word in the meantime. A picture of Christ. Christ had a cripple under each arm, the way people use crutches. He had a hard, glossy, thick tongue like the leaf of a camellia, and it was hanging out. He had his picture taken this way. He looked beat and strangely triumphant. After all, the sun was shining again. But the more you looked at the picture, the more you understood exactly what those words meant. The sun was a siren. The shining was its singing, and its song was again. Again and again you looked at it, and it always looked as if it had just been taken, as if the cripples were being paid a day's wages for 5 minutes' work, and the camellias had just torn off their leaves and given them away. And you got the feeling you too were donating your time just looking at it when you could be doing other things, though none of those other things you ever understood exactly. Kiss of the Sun. If, as they say, poetry is a sign of something among people, then let this be prearranged now between us while we are still peoples. That at the end of time, which is also the end of poetry and wheat and evil and insects and love, when the entire human race gathers in the flesh, reconstituted down to the infant's tiniest fold and littlest nail, I will be standing at the edge of that fathomless crowd with an orange for you, reconstituted down to its innermost seed protected by white thread, in case you are thirsty, which does not at this time seem like such a wild guess. And though there will be no poetry between us then, at the end of time, the geese all gone with the seas, I hope you will take it and remember on earth I did not know how to touch it, it was all so raw. And if by chance there is no edge to the crowd or anything else so that I am of it, I will take the orange and toss it as high as I can. English. All day the trees tossed, their thoughts were huge. All day they lavished their leafy tops against the sky and went on like this, insane without a reason, making the trees sound, telling about something that happened to them on a windy day. It was like coming across a man speaking secretly to his face. And when he was done, still he went on mouthing, as if a long, painful experience of time. But you must think him mad, munificent and hatless, a piece of tumbleweed in a poem growing as it blows. No, I tell you, it wasn't like this at all. By nightfall, the moths had eaten the letters of his name and left them in a sink like pieces of hair. And the trees were bare, roaring and bending and bare. Lichen. I apologize for not having much to say about these poems. They're all based on things that happened to me. Lichen. I wanted to go into the forest and collect lichen. I wanted to use the lichen in an art project because it had a crumbly, scaly texture and various shades of the same color appeared in the smallest patches. I was pretty sure lichen was rootless, but whether its living would be interrupted or unsettled in some way, I was unsure. I didn't want to pick lichen if picking it in any way resembled kidnapping. I seem to recall lichen was very old, among the oldest living things on earth, and that deserved considerable respect. But at the same time, there had to be young lichen. If lichen was living, it had to reproduce fairly regularly, and so some of the lichen had to be young. I did not know how to tell young lichen from old lichen. I did not know if young lichen and old lichen lived together. I did not know which of them, the old or the young, was better suited to kidnapping. I thought it true in general that the older the living thing, the closer it was to the end of its life cycle, and the less harm there was in kidnapping it. But also true in general that the younger a thing, the less its grip was on its own life, in this case the rock or bark, and the more willing it would be to be lifted out of its environment. I mean, the easier it would be to take it. If the old lichen clung most tenaciously to its rock or bark, it would be more difficult to perform the right sort of kidnapping, and if the young lichen could be fairly coaxed off its rock or bark, the easier it would be to perform the wrong sort of kidnapping. I sat and had these thoughts before I put on my coat to go into the forest and collect my lichen. My lichen. It seemed already to be in my possession. To eliminate as much confusion as possible, I decided I would collect only dead lichen. I knew that lichen was not of my species and certainly did not bury their dead. Therefore, the dead lichen must be everywhere in the forest, among the living, among the very old lichen, and among the young lichen, and I would find them. But how? How could I recognize the dead lichen among the living lichen? Surely the dead lichen did not perceptibly move, but nor did the living lichen perceptibly move. I had to admit I could not tell the difference between the living and the dead. Such an incapacity shocked me. If that were my criteria, it would be easier to collect bears, though, of course, in other ways, more difficult. This is my last one. Pontiac. Someone in Pontiac, Michigan, thinks I am pretty. I say, you should have seen me when I was 6 months old. My flesh the flesh of a partridge, my legs spread by a steel bar, my perfect feet in orthopedic shoes bolted to the bar. I tell him the whole 20th century was basically a mistake. I tell this not to him but to my bathrobe, who is linted and old and ignores me. She's been on dope for years. She's never been outside. She looks at me through the wrong end of a telescope and goes on chewing her sleeves. Finally, I start to get dressed, and when she's lying on the bed, she says, "Your capacity for suffering is infinite. How much fun we could have had if it was not." I pick her up, and we pass the afternoon in communal affection, without which the most benign of God's creatures would inconsolably wither. Thank you. Thank you.